Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Um, uh, Today's webinar is Revenue 101. And we're fortunate enough to be joined by Lynn Zweiback. We'll introduce Lynn in just a moment. But we welcome any sort of non-revenue managers. I think this is a great educational opportunity, another webinar hosted by HSMAI Los Angeles. Thank you for joining us. My name is Craig Carbonare. I'm the president of our Los Angeles chapter. I welcome each and every one of you. For some of you, I see familiar names, so thank you for supporting HSMAI Los Angeles and attending our events. For any new attendees, welcome. HSMAI Los Angeles host routine educational and networking events. Continue to follow us for updates on future programs. So thank you everyone for joining. Our board of directors, who you likely see on the call, are listed here. Thank you, Mitch Woolley, for your continued support and leadership of our chapter. Keenan Tekin, our VP of Marketing, Levon Miner, Jennifer Chedley, Sandra Martinez, kind of our glue that keeps us all together as managing director. And last but certainly not least, our VP of Programs and Education, Libby Zarahi. Libby put together this program today, and I personally am very excited. But let me hand it off to you, Libby.
Okay, well, let me start with a correction.
Yeah.
Lynn put this program together today and put her heart and soul into it. And for those, I'm going to tell you a little bit about her beyond her patience with me, which is extraordinary. But I want everyone to know the level of investment with Lynn. She's actually living in El Salvador. So when we look at her, that's where she's sitting today. And it is her morning. But Lynn, we so appreciate you being here. I have to tell you, I see some good friends on the screen today, Gary McClin being one of them, who is a former colleague of mine. And I think working with revenue managers, revenue leaders, is so vital when you're in sales, because you want to be able to talk on the same platform. We have a lot of salespeople. Of course, we think our business is the best, and why take it? But it's that revenue manager who takes things and breaks it down and says, is it really that good of a piece of business? And sometimes it is. Sometimes it's better placed elsewhere. But I just want to share, I have always learned, absorbed so much knowledge from collaborating with revenue managers. So thank you in advance for what we're going to go through today. Do we have any updates, Craig? I'm sorry to advance. Well, I've already went through that. We know we're going to stay on a level of Revenue 101, but just a quick reminder of Sales Leader Forums, November 8th in Long Beach. The Hotel Digital Sales Essentials, September 16th through October 11th. And before I go into new members, I just want to remind Lynn that she's going to tell us about how to enroll in her program as well, because I've already committed to it. I can't wait. But we have quite a few new members to welcome. So I'm going to run through that and then do a short introduction of Lynn, and then she'll own the rest of the program. So new members, we have quite a few. Johanny Siemer from KSL Resorts, Larry Jones, Ideas Revenue Solutions, Misty Lindo, love the icon, revenue manager with JC Resorts, Angelino Fernandez, CEO with Coty Family Companies. Next is Remy Infonso, head filmmaker for 10 Over Media. Jenny Reinfort, a marketing specialist with Pacific Hospitality Group. Mark Winchell with CRM or with Pacific Hospitality Group as well. Excuse me. Ryan LaRusso with Coty Family Members or Family Companies as well. We'd also like to take time to welcome Samantha Griffin with Paseo Hotel, Tammy Sisson with Pacific Hospitality Group. Let's hear it for Pacific Hospitality making that investment in HSMAI. Daniel Segerblum with Insamore, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, And then Lavon Miner, who we just mentioned a few minutes ago, has relocated to Agua Caliente in Palm Springs. Samantha Sugarman with Trinity Investments, Asha Hogg with Regent Santa Monica, Nicole Lazo, Terranea Resorts, and Danielle Hof with Mondrian Hotels. Also, Barbara Rogers from the Riverside Convention Center, Ryan Brown with Marriott International, Jeff Young, Classic Hotels and Resorts. We see that he's Vice President of Revenue Management, so very, very timely for today's topic. And then Debbie Miller, who's President of Social Hospitality. Faith Mock, Priceline Agoda Global Partner Solutions. Kay Chang, Priceline Agoda Global Partner Solutions, a nice third party joining today, our membership. Matthew Durbin with WH Hotels, and Whitney Milburn with DECA International, or Incorporated, sorry. I don't know if she's on here, but another former colleague of mine, Kay Cochran, who's Director of Sales and Marketing with Hyatt Regency Huntington Beach. Adrian Larkin with ETC Hotels. Michelle Mucha, also a former colleague with Windsor Hospitality. And Brandon Ebo with Sheraton Gateway Los Angeles Hotel. Also welcoming Jeff Sr., retired from Hyatt Regency Huntington Beach. Welcome your experience as well. And then Sergio Marquez is a dual director of hospitality and marketing for the Hyatt Place, Hyatt House. And I think that completes our list. So I want to tell you just a little bit about Lynn. And again, thank you. She's been in the hotel industry for over 20 years, and 15 of that, I believe, is in revenue management. She's written and delivered training all over the world. And when I say that, I'm talking about the United States, Africa, and Asia. She is the author and the study guide for the exam of HSMAI's Certified Revenue Management Analyst Certification, and also an esteemed adjunct professor of revenue management at Virginia Tech University. Now, having started her career in sales, she can be very empathetic as to what salespeople are going through when they're trying to develop their revenue skills. She's on a mission to educate our industry on how to better collaborate and deliver training for non-revenue managers, very much her specialty. So once again, Lynn, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and expertise. Lynn has, we previously talked, and she welcomes questions. If you would please put the questions in the chat box, I will monitor that and then pause if we have a question to pose. We believe that's a better approach than waiting till the very end. So with that being said, Lynn, thank you again so much, and we'll turn the program over to you.
Sure, and I'm just trying to get my screen restarted and sharing. So for one moment, it keeps going to full screen. Sorry.
That's okay.
I can't get it to let me do it and do Zoom. Sorry.
Hey, Craig, could you drive it, or Mitch, can you drive?
No, I really like to drive it. I just
okay.
And then I messed it up.
No problem. Thank you again, Lynn, for doing this. Yeah, I don't know about you, Libby, but I'm excited. That was a lot of new members. Thank you all for joining HSMAI and for attending today's program.
I think while Lynn's getting situated, and thank you again, this is a perfect time when I look at all those members to let those that are on today know that we are arranging networking events, in-person networking events where we can meet, get to know each other a little bit better, find out better ways and different ways to wrap our arms around a very, very volatile market still. So watch the website for those dates and locations. And I believe we'll have one yet this month and one in November and December. So Lynn, are you all set now? Are you comfortable?
And thank you for that. Zoom is tricky, but thank you so much for the introduction. I'm really excited to be here. I usually work with the East Coast of the US, so it's nice to be talking to people that are even earlier than me. Just to explain, in case you're wondering what I'm doing in El Salvador, my husband is with the State Department. He's a diplomat, so I have the pleasure of moving around the world without actually having to work for the government. So it's a great deal for me. And I also just realized I need to update my bio to say that I've delivered training in Latin America. So note to self. So welcome to the very condensed version of Revenue Management 101 for non-revenue managers. There is a lot of material to cover. We stuffed as much as we could into the description that you saw with registration. So I'm going to talk pretty quickly, and know that there is a lot more that I would love to tell you all, but you're not interested in giving me every day for the next 2 weeks. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to start with an introduction of what revenue management is, what makes it work for hotels, and then I'm going to go through some of the areas of revenue management that help support the overall goal. So let's get started. The commonly accepted definition of revenue management is selling the right product to the right customer at the right time for the right price through the right channel in order to maximize revenue.
Hey,
Now,
Lynn, can I stop you for a moment? You're just in presenter mode. We could see the slides, no problem, but we're also seeing your notes here. If you want to swap the displays. No, you're fine. You're fine. Do it all the time. No worries.
Thank you.
No worries.
Okay, let's see. Is that better?
Yep, that looks great. Thank you.
Okay, let's use my camera. Technology, right? You love it when it works.
You're fine.
Okay, here we go. Thank you. So, right, what is revenue management? So I was up to here. So in order to maximize a hotel's revenue, and that statement is pretty obvious. Obviously, any business wants to maximize revenue, any for-profit business. But there are a few things about hotels that make selling it a little bit different than selling, say, cars or shoes or porn. There's actually 5 things in particular. They are constrained supply. Hotels have constrained supply. And what that means is that sellers cannot readily increase the number of products or services available when consumer demand for them increases. And if you think about a hotel, it's a building. It has a fixed number of rooms, fixed number of function space, and it can't create more rooms when it wants to. So think of New York City on New Year's Eve. Every hotel could probably sell out 5 times over or more. But unfortunately, you can't just pop up a new wing when demand would warrant it. In other words, hotels have to make the most of what they have, given the demand that is coming with it. Next up is perishable inventory. And that refers to a product that can only be sold for a limited period of time. So here you see fruit, vegetables. They don't last very long. You go to the supermarket, some of them are fresh, you want to buy them. Some of them are starting to get brown and mushy, you don't want to buy them. And the longer they sit on the shelf, the browner and mushier they get, and the less you want to buy them. Hotel rooms are similar, but instead of a few days, they have a shelf life of exactly 1 night. What that means is if a room is not sold on a particular night, that room perishes and it can never be sold again. Now, we all know that the same product, the same room, bed, toilet, shower can be sold the following night, but it's technically a different inventory item. So again, hotels have to take advantage of opportunities to sell what they have when the demand warrants it. And I've been talking a lot about demand so far. And another thing that hotels face is that demand fluctuates. It changes due to myriad factors. Some are predictable, such as season, day of week, weekdays versus weekends, of course, holidays, and some are not predictable. There could be a snowstorm or a flood, or floods happen here in El Salvador, apparently, or other things that shock demand. I mean, what comes to mind for everybody is probably a pandemic, but there can also be things that increase demand. So it can go both ways. So hotels need a method to plan for the changing demand that they can anticipate, as well as be able to, as much as possible, contingency plan for the things that they can't anticipate. And again, that's not like cars or shoes or corn where demand varies, but it's smaller fluctuations and more predictable. Next, we talk about distinct market segments. And you're all salespeople. I know you're all very familiar with market, well, most of you are salespeople, with what market segments are. But I just want to specify my personal definition for revenue management purposes is this. Different customer groups with different buying habits, preferences, and willingness to pay. And that's key. You can slice and dice your market any way you want. Demographics, business type, purpose of travel, but it's all arbitrary unless it represents these three things: different buying habits, different preferences, and different willingness to pay. Shortly, we'll get into why that's important. And first up is the cost structure of hotels. They have high fixed costs and low variable costs. And I mean really high fixed costs and really low variable costs. If you've taken accounting or have a background in finance, you know what I'm talking about. But suffice to say that variable costs are based on the number of rooms occupied. So you sell one more room, you have a little bit more variable cost. And in hotels, we refer to this, most hotels refer to this as the cost per occupied room, or CPOR. And if you think about that, it's pretty small relative to the overall rate. And then there's the fixed costs, and they must be paid no matter what. And those are things like insurance, taxes, electricity to light the lobby and the generator, etc., management salaries. So those are really big costs when you compare them to the small CPOR. And that's important because basically this cost of selling another room is relatively small. So every dollar you earn above covering your CPOR can go to cover the fixed costs. So just to recap, before we jump into why these impact revenue management and what we do about them. Constrained supply, fixed number of rooms, can't build more, even if we want to. Perishable inventory, shelf life of one night for a hotel room. Fluctuating demand, some due to predictable reasons, some unpredictable. Distinct market segments, dividing up customers so that we can identify their buying behaviors, needs, and willingness to pay. And then low fixed costs, high fixed costs versus low variable costs. Okay, so that's a little bit of background. Now, what is revenue management and what has that got to do with what I just talked about? So I'm going to address most of these items. I'm not going to talk about costs because nobody wants to talk about accounting, unless you're in finance, in which case I apologize. But I'm going to go out of order because it just makes more sense that way. We have to build on some concepts. And I just want to preface this by saying that you're all seasoned people in the hotel business. You know your jobs, you know hotels. So I may say some things that you're like, well, duh, I knew that. But bear with me because everybody comes in with different levels of knowledge. And I want to just make sure that we're all talking the same language, calling things the same things. Different hotel companies call certain items by different words, and just so everyone's on the same page, I'm going to go through it. Okay, so again, revenue management, selling the right product to the right customer at the right time, at the right price, through the right channel. So we're going to start with market segmentation, and that covers the to the right customer bucket. So as mentioned earlier, we segment customers based on how and what they buy, not necessarily just who they are. And doing this allows us to target customers differently. I mean, you speak to a leisure customer differently than a business customer, but it also allows them to sell different products. And obviously a room is a room is a room, right? But when I say product, I'm talking about different rates, different booking conditions, different amenities, etc. And if we know who our customers are and what they want and how they buy, we can offer them different products. I'll show you a little bit later why that's particularly important for revenue management. So just to run through it, what am I talking about when I'm talking about market segments? If a hotel looks at all of its business, it might break that down and just look at transient business. Then transient business could be broken down into retail, bar, rack, whatever you want to call it. That's the selling rate for somebody who has no special discount. And then discounts. And then retail can be broken down further, premium, standard. Discounts can be broken down, business negotiated, government, AAA, AARP, or OTAs. OTAs has an asterisk because some brands consider OTAs a separate segment. I don't. I consider it a channel, but I wanted to put it up here because it is fast becoming a very significant part. Well, it has been, continues to be a significant part of our business. And these are just examples of market segments, and your hotel probably has more. But if you just look at this list, you can think about how each of these types of customers would want something different and be willing to pay something different for it. And then, of course, the other big segment that comes to mind is group. And that can be broken down, wedding blocks, trainings, company meetings, associations, etc. The other market segmentation that people sometimes think of is business versus leisure. I think transient versus group should come first, and then you can break it down by that. Again, your hotels probably already have something in place. So before we get into targeting different customers and how that impacts price and discounts, whatnot, I just want to say that there's this thing called mix, and that is the combination of different rooms that you're selling at different rates and how they relate to each other. So how many of your rooms are being sold at retail? How many of your rooms are being sold at group? How many are being sold at corporate negotiated? And the total must always equal 100% because it's the percentage. I want to show you an example. There's a little bit of math. I'm going to go through it super quickly. Don't worry about the math. If you're interested in it, I'm happy to send you the information later. So scenario one, a hotel has 200 rooms and we have two rates, keeping it simple. Bar rate at $200 and a discount rate at $150. They sell 30 bar, 160 to discount. It adds up to 190 rooms, which is obviously not 100% of the rooms. I have 200. The mix percentage, however, is based on 100%. So bar comes out to 18.75%, discount comes out to 81.25. The ADR, if you add up all the revenue and divide by the total number of rooms, is $159.38, and the RevPAR is $127.50. Now, let's say this hotel thinks its rate is a little bit high, and they might have some opportunity to sell more rooms if they lower it a little bit. Now, I'm not a fan of discounting wantonly, just in efforts to capture more demand. We'll talk about that when we get to pricing. But in some cases, a hotel is legitimately priced too high for its product and its market, in which case it might make sense to adjust it. So let's say this hotel does that. They lower their bar rate to $190 and hoping to sell more bar rooms. It means that they need to sell fewer discount rooms and can therefore raise that rate a little bit. So they raised the to $160. And their new mix looks like this. They sell 25% bar, 75% discount. Their ADR goes up $10 to $169.38. And their RevPAR goes up $7.5. Pretty significant. And the lesson I want you to take away here is that effective mix management can have a huge impact on your revenue. In other words, if you change your mix, you can increase your ADR RevPAR. It's a little bit counterintuitive, lowering a rate in order to raise your revenue, but I've done that with many hotels, and it works. Okay. Side note about pricing suites. This is a personal mission of mine. You can think about suites also as kind of figuring into the mix. In other words, you have standard rooms and you have suites. And how many of those suites are you selling at your premium rate, your posted rate for the suite? And how many of them are you just upgrading people into? Either loyalty members or frequent guests or service recovery, in which case you're selling a suite at a standard price. And here too, I've been very successful with doing this in multiple hotels. Lowering the premium on the suites, let's say you charge $100 above your standard rate for a suite. If you lower that, and I mean like lower it, like $20, you'll probably sell more suites at the suite rate. So rather than giving them away, you're now selling them. And your retail rates, or whatever rates you're selling suite rates in, will go up. You'll make more revenue. Everybody will be happier. Again, totally counterintuitive and kind of a hard sell for certain hotels that really take pride in their suites. But think about it. Somebody offers me an upgrade for $10 or $20, I'm pretty likely to take it. If it's going to cost me $100 and it's coming out of my own pocket, no. To pause, take a drink. If there are any questions, please submit them now. And I can't see the chat box, so I assume our hosts will tell me if there are questions.
Lynn, I'm watching the chat box.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Lynn, my understanding would be is that so long as you're selling that room above, obviously turn cost above RevPAR, is that even at $20 or $25 more, if the turn cost of that room is an additional $10, so as long as you're selling it more than $10 over, you're actually technically making money. But then there's a long-term aspect of it for the FF&E that you're actually going to wear that carpet out faster. You're going to do those other things. So we have to have a contribution toward that. So what would be a reasonable 20% reduction would be a reasonable thing?
I agree with you on the track that you're going, but I'm going to argue that the turn cost and FF&E cost should be added to the CPOR, not to the standard rate. So yeah, okay, you see where I'm going. So if you add the turn cost FF&E to the CPOR, you're still probably well below your standard rate. So then again, everything you get above that is pacing. I know, again, hard sell, hard to swallow, but it works. If you need me to convince your GMs, let me know. Happy to do it. I could show them a lot of math. Support this. Okay, so next up is forecasting, everyone's favorite topic. So data-driven forecast, and this fits the at the right time. So I said earlier that demand fluctuates, sometimes due to predictable reasons, sometimes due to unpredictable reasons. And we want to try to predict as much as possible the unpredictable. And a really analytical, scientific, mathematical forecast can help you get closer to predicting reality, what's actually going to happen. So let's first establish what a forecast is. It is the use of historic, current, and future data to determine the direction of future trends. And it's based on the assumption that events in the past tend to repeat themselves. So if you take that, add in what we know about what's going on currently, and then add in what we think / know is going to happen, we can create a forecast. A forecast, however, is not what is currently on the books. And to tell you, I was working with a hotel in Kenya, and they had a very obscure PMS system, and their on the books report was called the forecast report. But it wasn't a forecast, it was literally what had already been sold. And that just drove me crazy. So it is not what is on the books. It is also not the budget. Yes, you want to achieve the budget. The budget was a plan back when you did the budgets. I'm sure you're all hopefully wrapping up budgets for 2024. Libby's smiling. I know that's been the thorn in her side. But you shouldn't just put the budget in a forecast report and call it done. It is also, though, I will say it's a best guess. Nobody can see the future. Things are constantly changing. You make the best decisions that you can at the time with the data that you have, and you adjust as new information comes in. I've yet to see a forecast with 100% accuracy. So 3 areas are forecasted: group, transient, cancellations, and no-shows. We're going to run through these. So very high level. I could be happy to talk more about what actually, like, the nitty-gritty that goes into this. So group. First thing about group is that you never want to forecast a group at its contracted amount unless you have really solid evidence that they're going to use all the groups they contracted. You're all salespeople. I keep saying that. I don't know if you're all salespeople. Many of you are salespeople. You know what I'm talking about. So we always want to wash or net our group blocks. I've heard it called both things. And this is basically reducing the number of group rooms that we expect to show the difference between what is contracted and what we actually expect to happen. And we do this for 2 reasons. One is to get an accurate picture of the value of our group business, because that's important. And 2, because we need to know how many rooms we have left to sell to transient business. What do I mean? Consider a situation where a hotel has 200 rooms and they have 80 rooms contracted. This could be definites, tentatives, or to-bes, but the book value of their group business is 80 rooms. That means they have 120 rooms left to sell to transient. We call that the gross remaining supply. But we all know all those groups probably aren't going to pick up all 80 rooms. So we really want to consider this situation. Let's say we wash it 20 rooms. We're now forecasting 60 rooms, which means we have 140 rooms to sell to transient. So that's a big difference. 20 rooms could represent a significant chunk of revenue. How a hotel handles this varies, and there's two main ways. One is to blind cut the block in the system, so only hold the forecasted amount. The other is to hold the full amount and then oversell the hotel by the wash difference. That's up to each hotel about how they handle it, but it's important that everybody's on the same page. So again, now you have a true picture of what you have to sell to transient guests, and you can start figuring that into your transient forecast. And the underlying concept behind transient forecasting is demand. I've used that term several times so far, but let's put a little bit more meat behind it. Let's say a hotel has unconstrained demand that looks like this. And what I mean by unconstrained demand is the demand, the number of rooms that would book at the hotel if there were no constraints. Remember, hotels have constrained inventory. They have a fixed number of rooms. In this scenario, it's 200. There's also other constraints that hotels put on their rooms. Pricing is a constraint. You're basically weeding out people who don't want to pay your rates. Inventory restrictions, which we'll talk to, are also constraints. But if you had unlimited number of rooms and were willing to book everybody that wanted to stay with you, that would be your constraint demand. And you can see that on Wednesday, that's what this hotel is experiencing. They have enough demand to book over 200 rooms, but they only have 200 rooms to book it into. We call the amount above the capacity, or, well, yeah, consider the capacity as the main constraint. That's the excess demand. And then the amount below the capacity line is the constrained demand. And that's what we really need to focus on. So, like I said, we're going to talk about inventory controls, but they serve the purpose of weeding out that less valuable excess demand and capturing the most valuable constrained demand. But if you don't have a good picture of what your total demand is, you can't do that. You don't really know what you're working with. And a good starting point for coming up with these numbers is booking pace. So in this picture, the pink line is last year, the blue line is this year. It's pretty much a demand curve. It's upward sloping, but you'll notice the bottom x-axis is flipped. Usually the lower left corner starts at 0 and then the numbers go up as you move to the right. In this case, it's backwards because we're counting down to arrival. So this particular chart views bookings starting at 60 days before arrival day. And you can see it builds. I mean, obviously you're going to have more rooms on the books 10 days before arrival than you would 60. But you want to see what happened last year and then how this year compares. So in this case, we're pacing well behind last year. So using the historical data, we're going to temper that with current data, the pace, and adjust it based on how this year compares to the same time last year, same number of days before arrival. Now, many hotels have revenue management systems that do the complicated calculation, and there's lots of statistics. People with PhDs in math and engineering are designing those systems behind the scenes. So I never actually teach how to do a forecast, but what I do want you all to take away is just how to think about it. Think about constrained and unconstrained demand. And then think about the booking pace. If a system or your revenue manager is telling you that you're going to sell, I don't know, let's say it's 30 days before and you're going to sell 140 rooms and you only have 120 on the books, like you're going to want to question that. And when you're trying to convince your revenue managers to let you book your business, I would bring this up and ask to see the pace and ask to see the forecast and ask how they're coming up with that forecast. The final piece of this forecast is cancellations and no-shows. Often forgotten, but very important. And that's just an extra piece that reduces our forecast. Cancellations occur leading up to the day of arrival. No-shows occur on the day of arrival. Good revenue management system will also be forecasting these. Okay. Any questions on forecasting? It's a big topic. And it's a very emotional topic. There's always a lot of emotion in forecasting. Craig's smiling. He knows what I'm talking about. They called it the mind game of forecasting because some people wanted a high forecast, some people wanted a conservative forecast. I will say, though, there is no such thing as an accurate forecast. That is an oxymoron. A forecast is a best guess. After the fact, you can judge the accuracy of the forecast. How close was it to what actually happened? But people who say, I want an accurate forecast, they don't know what they're talking about. Are there any questions? Questions from our hosts? Questions from the audience?
I had not a question, but maybe, well, kind of a comment question. So you said that as a sales professional, you're going into the revenue manager and asking them, kind of how they arrived at that, and could you see it? I guess depending on the relationship you have, that could cause some friction because it's like, hey, I'm doing my job. Let me do my job. You go do your job. So how would you kind of broach that subject in a nice way so you could get that piece of business?
Excellent point. And, I assume everyone wants to be friends with revenue management. I know that's not reality. So now you have to judge the state of your current relationship with your revenue managers. And so what I'm about to suggest may not be appropriate given the current state of your relationship. But if you approach it as an interest, as in like, I really respect what you're doing. I know it's really complicated and you could be making this up, but I know it's complicated. I'm really curious how you're coming up with this number. Would you mind showing me? People are always happy to help people explain things. They like the expert. In fact, side note, I just learned that the most effective way to network is to ask people for help. Counterintuitive, but it's true. So yeah, I mean, just
I think, Lynn, also if I could just add one thing with my, this is Libby, with my experience in working with some really fabulous revenue managers, is when you observe them asking not just me, but my counterparts the same question. Let me just read what's the value of the business, Libby? What did we do this time last year, Libby? What's in the city, Libby? If they continue to ask that, then it kind of helps me formulate my proposition to go and talk to them. And also the unspoken, is it a good time that I could speak to you for about 10 minutes about a piece of business? So I've worked in business models where we have DBR meetings in the morning or in the evening, but that's not how business comes in. It comes in throughout the day. So if we have something of great urgency, we're going to reach out to that revenue leader and say, I need to speak with you. Do you have 10 minutes? But I have learned so much by the questions they ask me. It's kind of like, I don't want to waste their time. I want to come to them with the full bread basket so they can make an informed decision. I don't know if that makes sense to everybody, but that's how I tend to learn from really good revenue managers.
I love that. In fact, I teach a whole class on how salespeople should approach DBR. And a good revenue manager will ask you consistent questions and hopefully explain a little bit about their rationale. I love that. That's actually how I went from sales to revenue management. I realized I was much more interested in talking to my revenue manager about the business than actually talking to the customers about the business. So I switched sides. Okay, I see we're got about 15 minutes left. I'm gonna keep talking. I know I talk fast. I was born in New Jersey. It's the Northeastern girl in me, but so much to cover. So next we're going to talk about inventory controls. And this is the selling the right product. So this is basically determining the exact products that we're going to put on the shelf as in make available for customers to buy. And there's two types of inventory controls. There's availability controls, also known as stay restrictions. And then there's hurdle rates, which I'll get to shortly. So availability controls are basically rules that limit when a guest can arrive, when they can depart. Sorry, it's not really limiting when they can arrive or when they can depart. It's weeding out customers who do not arrive or depart when you want them to. Very important distinction. How long they must stay in order to be able to book a room. So any kind of 2-night minimum, that's an availability control. Sometimes they're obvious to the customers, sometimes they're done on the back end. And there's basically 3 types. There's a minimum length of stay, which means like you must stay 2 nights in order to have availability. Close to arrival, no matter what, we are not taking anybody who comes in on this day. And then closed, as in nobody can stay on this night. We're completely sold out. We're going to be walking people. If we have one more reservation, your revenue manager is going to freak out. So hopefully there's not too many closed. We don't really like close to arrivals. Really, you should be living in that minimum length of stay realm. And what exactly does that look like? Let's say a hotel with 100 rooms, doesn't really matter for this discussion, has this number of rooms left available for next weekend. And you can see that we're starting to run really low on Saturday. What's a hotel to do? Well, we want to sell those 5 rooms, obviously, but we also want to sell the rooms on Thursday and Friday and Sunday. And most of the guests coming in on Thursday, coming in on Friday, or staying over Sunday are going to be including Saturday in their stay. So if we run out of rooms on Saturday, you're kind of out of luck. We've run out of an ability to sell each other nights. Now, the hotel really never should have gone to this point, but that's another discussion. So what do? Well, you do something like place a minimum length of stay restriction, min 2, which means that if a customer wants to be able to arrive on Saturday night, they need to stay at least 2 nights. They need to include the Sunday. Now, you're looking at this and you're like, sure, Lynn, but nobody stays Saturday and Sunday. First of all, we're not forcing anybody to do anything. We're not saying you must stay over Sunday. We're just saying if you're not staying over Sunday and you're arriving on Saturday, you can't stay here. And if anyone books on Sunday with a Sunday stay, that's great, happy to have them. But what this minimum 2 is really doing is saving those rooms on Saturday for arrivals prior. In fact, I'm perfectly happy if nobody books a 2-night stay on Saturday, but I think I could get a 3-night stay with a Thursday arrival or a 2-night stay with a Friday arrival. And we should be able to get at least 5 of those, which means saving those rooms for early arrivals was successful. If it's not successful, open up the min 2, you can probably sell it at the last minute. A lot of people don't think about restrictions this way, and it can hold hotels back. But just remember, you're not making anyone do anything. You're just weeding out people who don't want to do what you want them to do, and you're saving rooms on high demand nights for stayovers from low demand. The other is hurdle rates. I couldn't find an icon with a horse, so today we've got a unicorn. This is a minimum rate that a reservation must meet in order to be allowed to book. We won't get into the math. Most revenue management systems that use hurdle rates do this calculation for you. You never need to worry about it. But it's basically a minimum threshold. It says, okay, you want to stay on Saturday, our busiest night. You're going to need to have, your stay is going to need to have an average rate of X. Your whole stay needs to provide us a certain value in order for us to give you this really special room on Saturday. Okay, we'll finish with pricing strategy. And this is the at the right price. So we're not going to get, unfortunately, to distribution, which is through the right channel. But again, happy to talk to anybody about that if you're interested afterwards. So price is determined by not what the owners think people should be paying for the room. It's determined by how much the seller is willing to accept. And I mean, like, what makes sense for the hotel given its cost structure and a certain level of pride, but not this huge aspirational rate that some people like to charge sometimes. How much a buyer is willing to pay and what makes sense given market conditions. And the intersection of all three is the rate. Now, how much the seller is willing to accept, that obviously changes based on day of week, season, room type. Thank you, Mitch, for making that point. How much a buyer is willing to accept or is willing to pay. This is where market segments start to come in, because different markets have different value and willingness to pay. And then the market conditions, you never want to base your pricing on your competitors, because that assumes your competitors know what they're doing, and they may not. But you want to make sure it makes sense given the entire economic landscape in the market.
Lynn, sorry to interrupt, but we have about 5 minutes left.
Oh no. Okay. Okay, I'll just end here then and leave you all on the cliff note of all the other pricing information. But I'll just say it's really important to think about the value that the customer places on your product. Not what you think they should want to pay, but how much they actually value it. And that's based on how much they value your product. And that varies based on different customers, different market segments. A family traveling with small children is going to place a higher value on a hotel with a pool than a business traveler. Their price sensitivity, that's how sensitive they are to changes in price, and their willingness to pay. And that's pretty much the threshold of the amount they're willing to shell out to stay at your hotel. So yeah, lots more to think about in terms of pricing, but that's always a really good starting point. And the customer's perception is sometimes overlooked in the equation. I will just skip ahead to the very end to wrap it up. Can I do that? Oh, I'd have to. I flipped too fast. Okay, so first of all, if this interested you, you can do your own little test of what you've learned today. Scan this QR code. Ideas, shout out to the new Ideas members, has great resources. They have a little game that you can play. They also have some free courses. If you want to learn more, I will be holding a full-length course of Revenue Management 101 in 2024. Dates have not yet been set, but if you're interested, please email this address. I'll get you on the list, and as soon as registration opens, you'll be the first to know. You'll get some special pricing discounts, and I'll get to see you all again.
And we can connect with you through LinkedIn too. Is that
yes.
good? Okay.
I will. Yep. Here is my social information. Love LinkedIn. Please connect with me, follow me. I'll follow you. Check out my website. I do have several other courses that are available. They can be customized given a hotel, a specific hotel, a specific product. Like if you're a hotel partner, marketing versus sales, etc. And I will just skip back. Also, shameless plug for the CRMA that Libby mentioned at the beginning. I do not get a cut of this. So this is just wanting to educate people. It's very basic. You don't need to apply like you do with the CRME. And it basically covers what we just talked about in a little bit greater. So you can scan the QR code here.
And then do I get this through the HSMAI website, the global site?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. This QR code will take you directly to that page on their site. You can also get to it through my website.
Okay.
Or if you just Google HSMAI CRMA.
Well, I don't expect to remember. I took a snapshot of it, so I
no, of course not.
But for those of you that are here today, and I'm sorry I didn't mean to speak over you, Lynn, today's presentation will be posted on YouTube Friday, I believe is the projected day. So I know that a lot of people were making notes, and I think, again, Lynn, thank you so much. I think you whetted everybody's appetite that we're going to ask you to come back at some point. As we finalize programs for future, this is such an important skill set that we all want to continue to refine. And I love the fact that you talk on everybody's level. So your initial conversation or your initial introduction really made sense to all of us. So thank you once again. I'll turn it back over to Craig at this point.
Thank you again, Lynn. This was a great program. We hope everyone attending saw more than enough value in joining today's session. As I mentioned before, if you're interested about HSMAI future programs, whether they be education or networking events, please follow our social media, HSMAI Los Angeles, to keep up to date on those events. And we look forward to seeing you all again in the future. Thank you again, Lynn. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It was great being here.